Hello, Michael. It's so nice to have you here. I'm
Hi,
excited to interview
Melanie.
your book. So,
Well, thank you. It
yeah,
it's good to see you again and to hear from you. So
over
it's a
Zoom once
pleasure.
again. Yeah, over Zoom once again. I feel like I've met a few people a few times over Zoom, and I feel like I've met them in person. And you meet them in person, you're like, wow, like you actually look a little bit different. Or I
Yeah,
envisioned you a little shorter. You're so tall, you know.
exactly. You never
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, but I mean, you might not keep the inner dialogue to the self. But yeah, but it's interesting to actually meet some people in person. So, but I feel like I've met you in person. So we have Michael Honegger. Did I pronounce it correctly? We even went over.
Absolutely. You
Um,
nailed it.
because I know we've met, but I've always said Michael, and I was like, I have to practice the last time. To interview you for your new book, which like I said, I usually like to kind of hold it up by my head and give a little context. And your new book, The Need to Know. So I am really delighted to introduce this work and a lot that you developed beforehand, but also we kind of workshopped in the workshop. So a lot of your cohort will probably be really excited to see that this book has been published. So it's
Actually,
great.
actually, that's true. I've already gotten some emails from a few of the folks in the class in the
I know
workshop that
Lawrence
we.
mentioned it to me.
Right,
So Lawrence
right.
Matthews, who we hope, Lawrence, if you're listening, you do a book eventually too.
And we
Um,
appreciate it.
Yes. So this book, there's much mystery, obviously, in the book. The essays reveal a lot of the story and where there's gaps. Um, quite like an imagine information that you would piece together as a spy might do in espionage. So you kind of leave a few gaps for the imagination. Um, did the repeating phrase, obviously from the title, do you have the need to know play a role in editing and design as well?
Oh, absolutely. The need to know came about, not, I mean, obviously, it was my father's response, my father being a spy, his response to any childhood inquiries about what he did or strange things that might have happened when we were growing up. And his response was always the need to know. Oh, do you have the need to know? And that usually was just the indicator that basically shut up, change the subject. I mean,
Mhm.
he said it in a very nice way, but you knew it was a conversation ender. And and as a result, my father had a stroke for the last 20 years of his life, actually. And I mean, he was very ill for the last 20 years of his life. So I never really got to ask those questions that we always think we should have asked our parents about what they did, when they did it. And so I had the need to know uh, what it was that he was involved with on a more specific basis than just being a spy or a counterintelligence agent. So so it became part of the design also. It was one of my key wishes with in working with the designer, who was Aneta Kowalczyk with Blow Up Press in Warsaw. And one of my demands basically was that it be mysterious and that we not give every answer because, quite frankly, I don't have the answers. And, I wanted to leave it with that open ended, um, those questions that remain because we'll never know. I've grilled my family. My poor mother who is now 99. I've asked her many times about what she knew, and she shared it. And in fact, she wrote an essay in the book, which was rather. There were some startling things in her essay that we talked about, and So yes, the need to know. It's a multi-layered question, basically, that is totally wrapped up in the book. I mean, at every level. So, and
Yeah,
I still have the need to know.
yeah, we'll get into a little bit of the description, but because people are coming in blind to this interview in some instances, and we can address some of that in the description. But so this is a book that speaks about your father's time in Germany during the Cold War, or right
Right.
after post-World War II, when there was a divided Germany,
Correct.
and his role in kind of espionage and surreptitious activities that were going on at that time. So a little bit of a brief without giving too much, because there's, that you leave because there are gaps in the story. There's gaps in the story for you. And you include some of your own images in the book too. Like I did flag one of them here. This is yours, because this one actually is written about in the essay, correct? So this is an archival photo, and then this is yours behind it. That
They're
is yours.
both, those are both mine. Yeah.
Oh, they're both yours.
Yeah.
Okay.
The little brownie star flash image was taken when my sister and I went to Berlin right after the wall went up. So that's part of some of the interesting elements of the book. There are images my father took
Mhm.
that are not identified as such, but of Berlin during that period. We went up at two different points after the wall went up, and for all of us, everyone in the family went up at different points. My mother went up with her girlfriends the week before the wall went up, and there's a photo in there, and her train ticket on the duty train. That's what that train ticket, it's an insert in the book.
Ah, yeah.
It's an actual copy of the train ticket that she used to go to Berlin, and it was the week before the wall went up. And there's an image of her and her girlfriends. It's a group of women who went up
Mhm.
um, to visit a German friend of ours. And then my sister and I went on the duty train independently, and I had a little brownie star flash at that point. And all of the little square photos in the book are mine from when I was 12.
Oh.
And then there are also the photos of my father. I think I can actually show you one right at the start of the book, where it's a picture of Berlin. Well, now I of course can't find it, but there
Yeah,
it
then I
is.
think, but I did find
Yeah,
this
there's
is
this.
the
Yes, that's
ticket.
the ticket. That's the
Okay.
ticket. It's a
Okay.
facsimile of the actual ticket.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that just
which I
rests inside the book. Yeah.
right, right. And this was, for example, this is a two-page spread of a photo my father took at Checkpoint Charlie when he went up a few months after my sister and I were there for a business visit to Berlin and to West Berlin. And he took photos that I discovered in my mother's closet when I was visiting her, right when I was near the end of photographing for the book. And I discovered the slide trays of photos my father had taken, and that I had these slides that I had never seen since the 60s. And I had them all scanned and discovered they were deteriorated. And that's why the photos are looking rather damaged, because they had been damaged in Florida's climate, so where my mother lives.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so
Yeah.
it was a wonderful serendipitous coincidence that I had photos that I had taken that I discovered by chance, and photos my father had taken. And so it was kind of it pleased me immensely to have that juxtaposition. So
Yeah, because it does fill in a gap there too with the historical
right.
and I like not
Yeah.
knowing which ones are which too. As you're looking at it. Now we all know. Now the secret's out. But
Well, no,
but
that's been one of my dilemmas in talking about the book. Everyone asks questions about some of the and when I do give away some of the secrets, or not secrets, but some of the mystery of the book, it sometimes takes away from people's enjoyment. Although it's also been frustrating.
a little
It's
bit,
also
but then they
been
have maybe watch interviews or read things, and then they have to, it's still the same process. It's the process of what was happening with your father in a much more real world, dangerous sort of way. But what you did, what the designer did, and now what the viewer is kind of doing, filling in a lot of those gaps. And they have to kind of dig in other places to find that evidence to fill in the gaps. So I'm arguing, I guess, that it's not a bad thing that you're revealing a few things along the way.
Well, no, I agree. I mean, my partner he always says, people want to know, but so there's still a lot of mystery to the book. So
Yeah, and there's other okay, so speaking, we'll just jump right into that. Like is models of books, because there's other books that do something similar, and I'm sure you did some research and found some of those. What are some of the books that you kind of modeled this out off of as far as design? Did you have some in mind?
well, there was one. Oh yes, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. It's called. It was also done by Blow Up Press, actually. Oh, I'm embarrassed that I can't remember
Is
her.
it Pitcairn Island?
Yes.
Yes, I
But
saw that on their
it,
site. That is so fantastic. I haven't seen it physically. I'd love to see it
oh,
physically.
it is the most amazing book. In fact, I saw that, and it was what triggered my contacting the designer. It was because of that. I was reviewing the book, Pitcairn, for Lenscratch, and I couldn't believe it. Well, I get this. It's a huge book, and when I started going through it and trying to figure out, it was such a mystery. And I thought, this is exactly the kind of thing I want for my book. And it was right before I was getting ready to look for a designer. And so, I contacted Aneta because of that, and Gregor, the team that runs Blow Up Press. And I kept talking about that because the book is, you should really get a copy of this book because it's one of the most fascinating layouts. When I first got it, I was totally baffled. And then it's the same thing I want people to have with my book. It's a little bafflement, and then you start digging and reading and putting all the pieces together. And it was just, it was a revelation. I thought it was a terrific book and a terrific design because it's actually two books in one, which I won't say any more because it's
We
worth
could
discovering.
take more of a look on Pitcairn on the Blow Up Press website.
Website, right? Their
Yeah.
website, right?
Buy that book and your book.
Right. Yeah, it's blowuppress.eu. So both books are available. I think Pitcairn's almost sold out. So,
Yeah.
but
Well, tell
anyway.
me a little bit about, since we've kind of jumped in that, I want to talk about the essays just a little bit too, but let's, since we've jumped into talking about some about design, can you talk about like some of the technical aspects of design, and then maybe some of your role as you participated in the design and even beyond that, maybe some of the production process. So some of the nitty gritty a little bit, for those who probably are looking to do their own books?
Well, I have to admit that the initial stage of how we worked on the design was intriguing, because I flew up to Warsaw to meet with. I had met the two of them, the Blow Up Press folks, here in Nice. Actually, they came to Nice when we originally agreed to do the design, and I then flew up to Warsaw for a weekend, and we spent the whole weekend together. And I had sent them, I would say about 200, 200 images.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just sort of everything I kind of wanted them to see. And so we went, she had printed them out in very small, format.
Mm-hmm.
And we went, she said, okay, I want you to, and we had kind of this card game where it was a snowy day in Warsaw, and we're sitting there with cups of tea and later a little wine. But we laid out she would say things like, I want you to pick out the most important images from your point of view and put them in some sort of sequence, which, I've done over and over and over. But and then she would also be, challenging me a little bit, and they both would.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where some of the surprise came in, because there's one image in the book of me as a child. I'm at a table doing my homework or something of that
Mm-hmm.
ilk, and she pulled that out and she put it out, and this is a critical image. And this was after we had spoken for half a day, 3/4 of a day. And she said, this is a critical image in my estimation. I was a little surprised, because I was thinking of a different emphasis. And she was moving me towards the family and the impact of what my father did on the family, and which was rather important, and not in a negative way. I mean, it wasn't just his work influenced our lives also. So it was, and I think she wanted to put that out in front. And the other thing about that image that's so important, of me doing my homework, is there's a radio behind me in the image. And that's the radio where my father used to take down code from broadcasts over the radio. So I think there's a vignette in the book that describes some of that. But that became, in my mind, a very critical piece of the puzzle, and gave hints. But then, so we went through we came up with about 90 images, and then we would discuss each image. And when she finally gave me the dummy, the initial, not even the dummy, but the pre-dummy, and had me, we would go back and forth online. And when she gave me the first cut, there were a few images I said, no, I prefer to have this image in place instead of X instead of Y. And we went back and forth a few times. But for the most part, she came up with I said, I want mystery, I want things hidden, if possible. And that's when she came up with the codes that are hidden.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of, I won't say any more. There are hidden codes, and those were the actual codes found in my father's files. So, and in the one is in his writing, his handwriting. But so it was that kind of thing that went on, and she would kind of tease me with different iterations, and it went back and forth until the only final debate was over the cover. And
Oh,
when she initially sent it,
yeah.
there are codes here. You can't really see them well, unless I hold it up to the light, you can see the embossed codes. But when she first sent it, it was just black and the codes were only on the back. And I said it looked too funereal. It looked like some sort of homage.
Mhm.
And I said, can you bring the codes around to the front? And she did. And the other debate was over hardcover versus soft cover. And we had a little bit of a debate, a tug of war over that. They wanted soft, I wanted a hardcover.
Mhm.
And I finally said, I sort of insisted. It was the only time I really put my foot down, because I just felt it was more of a legacy in
Mhm.
hardcover than soft. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and you get the codes on the spine
on
too.
the spine as well,
Nice that
right?
it wraps all the way around. So it
Yeah,
is blind stamped, but if you start to kind of look at it, it's pretty intriguing. Like this adds a layer of intrigue. If you're looking at it on bookshelves,
exactly,
or
exactly.
what is that? And you don't want to pull it out more so. So yeah, well, what was the timeline from like what, let's say not from start, like of when you first like came up with the inception of project, you can talk about that if you want to too. But like from start to finish, maybe from of the when the project was the inception and to finish, but at least the book timeline too, like from when you kind of started working with them for
Sure.
design.
I was very fortunate. The project started in 2019 at a workshop with Eileen Smithson, actually. And somebody interviewed me as an introductory exercise for the workshop. And I mentioned during, it was one of those dyad situations, you interview each other and come back and introduce each other. And the person who introduced me uh, had focused on my father being a spy. And
Mm-hmm.
I had just thrown that out peripherally. And Aline jumped all over it and said, "Oh my God, there's your project." And it kind of hit me, and I went, "She's absolutely right." And she gave me a number of other books. Monty Willett's book that I didn't realize how it could be done in some, I didn't have the concept in mind. And
Right.
she started giving me ideas, and I went, of course I can do this. And it was a 4-year process.
Mm.
I began looking for the designer first, and what happened was I was supposed to meet. I applied for the Blow Up Press Book Award, and with the book, and all they require. And by the way, it's open again for this year right now. So if anyone's interested in applying, it's a terrific. If you win, it's fantastic. I did not win. I was shortlisted. I was shortlisted 2 years in a row because I modified the the project during that 2 years. And the second year, I didn't get it again. And but I wanted to meet these folks because they were very, very nice in their rejections. And and so I went to I wrote to them and asked if I could meet them in Arles for the book fair in Arles. This was a year or two ago. And so the day of that I was to meet them, there was a train strike and I couldn't get to Arles. So I called them and said, "Is there any way you're coming through Nice on your way back to Warsaw?" And they were. So we agreed to meet and have dinner, and we had a terrific dinner. And I talked to Annetta about doing the design, and we agreed on that. And they said she said I could get it done by the end of the year. That was a year ago, a year and a half. And so after about 3 months, I started thinking to myself, well, why not ask them if she's designing it and she's the in-house designer for this press, why not ask them? And this was right after the workshop I took with you. I decided, well, I'm going to pursue this. And so I called them and said, can we have a Zoom call? And I said, well, look, you know, I shortlisted twice for your book prize, and you're designing the book basically. Would you consider publishing it? And Gregorz said, well, with a few changes, we might consider it. And I said, what other than I thought, uh-oh, where's this going? You know. But he mentioned what the changes were, and they were so minor. He said, you would have won the prize if this had been or something to that effect. And but it was this that bothered us. And I said, well, it was so minor. And I thought, I have no problem with that change. And they then said they had just had a book drop out of their lineup. And so they said, and I think it was because when I had dinner with them in Nice, I mentioned that my mother was 98 at that, or 97 at that time, and was very excited about the prospect of the book coming out. Well, Annetta, God bless her, she said, well, we'll make sure this gets out quickly for your mother's sake. And they put it in the queue where the book had dropped out, which meant it came out probably a year faster than it would have if it had been in the normal lineup. And she insisted and overruled her husband. And in terms of the sequence, she said, I'll make it work. And I will be eternally grateful to her for that decision, because my mother was thrilled. So
yeah, and it was released late last year, or was it
October? In October
2023.
23, right?
Yeah,
and the discussion was just a year earlier. So I mean, of even getting it designed. So it was. I thought it was quick.
Yeah, that's really fast. And then, you know, photographers are always curious too about budgets. How did you kind of set up your budget and work with that?
Well, I basically asked them what it would cost. It was in two parts. I feel like I was very fortunate in this regard, because in comparing with other friends who have had books published this past year, I agreed to pay the design price that she basically quoted, and that was 5,000 euros, and which is sort of, from what I gather, reasonable. I mean, and then we split the publishing costs 50-50, and that was another 10. So that was my contribution, total contribution, and that included all the little tip-ins and inserts and the leporello, that accordion piece at the end. There are a number of tip-ins. So and that was it. And you know, I've talked to other friends, and I feel like I got a very reasonable deal compared to what I've heard from. I also got 50 copies
Mhm.
for review copies and that sort of thing. And
It's an
I'll
edition
be
of 800 signed and numbered
right,
copies. Yeah.
right. In addition, right.
Yeah.
So,
So,
and I didn't have to. I have. They didn't ship 400 copies to me to distribute. They're the main distribution point. The only difficult part is the distribution in the U.S., but it's been selling well, so I can't really complain. And they don't charge an outrageous shipping charge. It's rather reasonable compared to
yeah, I can't
for the
remember how much
site.
I paid, but I got mine from Blow Up. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay, yeah,
from there.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm happy to have it. So, because I wanted to talk about because you mentioned Aline too just a few minutes ago, but I would just want to talk about the three essayists. So you
Okay,
kind of try to round out the work as well as round out the book and the project itself by using the essayists. So many people in the photo world know Aline Smithson, who's an educator, photographer, teacher, and she started Lenscratch magazine. But for those who don't know, we just gave a little brief introduction, and you also mentioned taking a workshop with her, so there's an obvious connection. And she seemed to have sparked the initial concept. So, but can you tell me a little bit about the two other essayists?
sure. Brenton Hamilton is one of my mentors in photography. He is a photo educator who was working at Maine Media for many years, and that's where I initially met him in their professional certificate program. And he's been a guide on this particular project. I take periodically I will do a critique class with him and other photographers, and he guided me and critiqued the work as it evolved over the 4 years, especially during COVID, when everyone was online. I had about probably 3 or 4 critique workshops with him and other photographers who were very helpful in giving me feedback about the work. And so Brenton knew the work, and he has an eye that is very unique from my point of view. He looks at it in terms of, in a way, in terms of the history of photography and its place. And I think each of the essays brought a different angle to the book, which his is very much focused on sort of what the images are conveying, and sort of what is photography, and in terms of archival work and sort of melding current work with archival work, that sort of thing. And the third essayist was again a very serendipitous moment. Somebody wrote to me about an image that I had done. They had seen it some gallery or something, and I was very flattered by this. It was a very effusive, nice letter asking about my work and all that sort of thing. And I thought, well, that's very nice. And I forgot to answer the letter, and I hate doing that. And about 2 weeks later, I wrote to this person, and I apologized. I said, I'm in the midst of getting this book on my father being a spy in the Cold War, blah, and he wrote back and he says, I'm a Cold War historian.
Oh,
So George Reich, I thought this is so unbelievable that it's meant to be. And I wrote back immediately and I said, I am looking for an essayist that will cover the Cold War angle of the book. And he agreed, and we had numerous back and forth conversations. I sent him a lot of I sent him the dummy and a number of other items so that he could get a sense of what it was all about. So that was great, and I thought his essay was terrific because
Yeah, they're
so
great pieces in there, and it's great to have the vignettes like you talk about of your stories. And I found it interesting too, the connection. Is it George A. Reich? Is that how you say it? Reich?
yes.
George, there's a couple little things that I just pulled out where George notes photography was a mainstay of Cold War intelligence, so much so that cameras themselves were cloaked in secrecy. And then connecting, Brenton talks about photographs don't always show us anything that is steady. They hover between spaces that are formed as an index, potentially showing us a dodgy endpoint. And then he follows with, you use the ambiguity of photographs to his end. And he interrogates his personal history, evaluates his own boyhood narrative, and employs the toolkit of espionage. So I think that they like at three, and then Aline's maybe two. It's like they all kind of thread together what the book is about. So you talk about how you're explaining some of the photos in some of your interviews, but the essays, which I love when photographers use the essays to help explain, because text applies a lot of meaning. So I think it was really wise selections, and their choice of words adds a lot to the book.
Well, thank you. No, I thought that the essays had to. One of my key points was I didn't want a lot of text in the book because I wanted people to try and figure it out. And you had asked earlier about design influences. Red-headed peckerwood was another
That one came into
major.
my mind too, and I was like, yeah,
Yeah, I had a workshop with Christian Patterson, and um, he was very helpful in. I mean, when I saw that book, I just thought this is sort of the path I want to take.
It felt a little groundbreaking in the photo world at the time. There may, some other photo book historians might argue otherwise, that they're like, oh, here's an example of that, and here's an example. But the way that he used the interweaving between fact and fiction, fact is still the questionable thing, like he talks about the dodgy endpoint, Breton does, so
Right. No,
yeah.
so I should have brought that up in the beginning, but it just hit me that, of course, it was a major influence, and so those essays became rather critical, and and also I noticed that with the Pitcairn Island book, the essays were absolutely necessary, and I got three different really unique perspectives. I was very, very pleased and by each of them. So
Yeah. Well, I got a couple more questions. So, before we wrap up, one of them is I usually like to ask photographers who have just published a book what they think was their biggest mistake, and then what they think was, this is so amazing that it's so on point for a decision that I made. Can you address maybe you could start with the bad first if you want, and then say something that, if you were to give advice, maybe in a positive sort of way to photographers who are doing a book.
I think in terms of a mistake, I think I approached certain publishers prematurely. And I don't think I had done. I was very fortunate with Blow Up Press because they had seen the work in the raw, if you will. by just 20 images that you submit for a book competition. But I've seen other photographers PDFs that they send to publishers, and I think mine could have been more elaborate, more extensive than what I originally sent out. Also, you're going to get a lot of no's, so or not even no, you won't even get no's. They just don't answer. And I had some connections with people who were helping me, and I say use any connection you might have. You never know what a publisher's looking for. Every publisher's unique. I've learned that from writing about publishers for Lenscratch. It's just they're all over the place, and do your research is the key point. And pursue every avenue. I mean, the blow up press thing was serendipitous. If I hadn't decided to call them and sort of say, "Will you publish it?" after they're designing, I just thought it made sense, and it made sense to them evidently. So
yeah, like when I interviewed Erica Reed, she was like, be your own biggest advocate. I think can't remember the verbatim quote, but essentially that's the gist of it. Just advocate for yourself. Just make sure
no,
that
absolutely, and
you
pursue
follow your pride and put that work out there.
Yeah, no, and you will get rejection. I mean, there's no question. So sometimes it's harsher than you would like, but actually I got no answers, which I consider rejection, but it's better than being actually brutally, it's never brutal. So
well, the book is great.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think you got a really good product out of it too with your tenacity.
No, I'm proud of it, and I think my father would be too. He'd be thrilled. So
well, and probably really honored too. So here's the book, The Need to Know, with all this beautiful stamping on it. We can finish up. Will you just let people know where they can get the book?
Well, there are two options. There are more than two, but mainly the options are in Europe. You can get it through my website, which links directly to Blow Up Press, and that's michaelhoneggerphotos.com. And if you go directly to Blow Up Press, it's blowuppress.eu, and they will get it out very promptly. So, and they are signed and numbered. So
good. And maybe check with if you have a local photo book store or something like that you deal with, ask them if they carry a Blow Up Press or your book. That might be another good way to get demand going. So
yeah. Well, I appreciate this, Melanie. And it's a pleasure seeing you again and reconnecting. And I thank you for your time.
So much. This is very exciting. And I hope to see you again soon, maybe in person.
That would be nice. All right. Thanks so much.